I was sick, and when they had the alert, and I made up my mind. Well, my husband didn't want me to go ahead and put my papers in, so I went to put my papers in.
Okay, and that was out in California?
Yes.
At that time? Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you end up back in South Carolina?
Well, he was sent to Japan,
Right.
as I said, and so we came home and to stay with my mother and daddy, and me and my little boy.
Okay.
Money was tight then, and my mother kept my son while I worked, and I saved $500 that 18 months he was gone, and I thought I was rich.
What kind of work were you doing during that time?
It was at Utica Mohawk, J.P. Stevens.
Oh, okay.
It was February 13th in 1962, which was the anniversary of a Women Marine Corps. So I signed up on the anniversary of the Marine Corps, but then I was let out on the anniversary of the Women's Marine Corps. When I married Nick, he was stationed in North Carolina at that time, and then he was transferred to Parris Island, South Carolina, to be a drill instructor and then a physical education instructor. And we just stayed there, and then when he went overseas, I stayed in Beaufort, and then when he came back from overseas, he was stationed here in Greenville at the Reserve Center that was on Main Street at the time. And and after we divorced, I just loved it so much here that I just decided to put down roots here.
Well, my active duty service ended in Washington, D.C. while I was there. And I kind of wanted to stay there and all. I had actually applied for a job that was available at the Pentagon. But then the president kind of put a freeze on the jobs. And so I came back to South Carolina because it was my home, and back to the position that I actually had left prior to going into service. And was able, they actually held my job for those 5.5 years. And allowed me to step back in, and then I received a promotion within the first year after coming back. So that's what brought me home.
I met my husband. I will tell you the most wonderful thing ever is meeting my husband. He's a retired Air Force pilot. He flew twice in Vietnam. He was shot down. He luckily was picked up about 8 or 10 hours later, because his job was to go, if a pilot got shot down, to go get the bad guys away so the helicopters could come pick him up. So he did get shot down. He's an amazing guy. He's a wonderful husband. He's a great dad. So I was very fortunate to meet him, and that was the whole best part of my Air Force career. But right before we got out, we had hoped to have children, and so I had gotten pregnant about 9 months before I was going to get out, as it so turned out. And so we were in Del Rio again. I was an instructor, and you couldn't, when you were pregnant, you couldn't fly. All these airplanes are ejection seat airplane trainers. So as you're pregnant, you can't fly an ejection seat airplane. So I had a desk job for a colonel, and so I did that, and it made me quickly realize I don't ever want a desk job. I don't want to answer a phone. I don't want to listen to people complain. That is not my cup of tea. I think I'd much rather be flying airplanes. So that was a great experience. But I had my baby right before it was time for me to get out. So I definitely remember that. And my last flight, OT-37, and like I said, being an instructor was just the best. I was at FedEx for about 4 or 5 years, and he flew for Michelin Tires, so he was home most of the time. So early on, we got a nanny who came when we needed her. And we usually didn't need her much, but when we needed her. And then I was fortunate to get to fly out of Greenville for about 5 years. So my schedule was, I'd go to work at about 9 o'clock at night, so put the boys to bed, go to work, flight from Greenville to Memphis. They sort the packages, and then we get back on the airplane, fly back, and get home about 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And at FedEx, I started off an airplane called the 727, and it's a 3-person. There's the captain, co-pilot, and flight engineer, which is what I was at the beginning. And just kind of an interesting story about that is there was that same, we really would rather you not be here. And back then, when you went to the training, they could ask you anything, they could make you do anything. So if you were doing things successfully, they just kept making it harder and harder and trying to break you. And there were a couple of people who went way over the line. But I survived. And even, 30 years later, I remember walking down the hall in my last training, and I saw one of those guys, and I thought, you did your best to get rid of me, and I am still here.
My last day in uniform was the day I retired. It was in a small ceremony in Quantico, Virginia, and I was wearing my camouflage uniform. I had, my favorite general officer in the world was my retiring officer, and several friends in the audience, and the biggest memory, and I knew it was going to be tough when it happened, was that last moment at the end of the ceremony when they played the Marines hymn. And I knew it was going to be the last time I heard that while standing at attention in uniform. And it was as emotional there as I'm getting right now. But yeah, that was a special moment. And I always tell people, you might have more than one wedding in your life. You might have multiple graduations in your life if you continue on through, higher education. You might have several divorces, but you're only going to retire from the military once. So it's a very special ceremony. Well, my plan after retirement was always to return back to the upstate. It's home. It's where my family is. During my retirement ceremony, the joke was plan A, B, and C were to come home and work for Clemson University in some capacity. I'm glad to say that did happen. It took a few years to make it happen, but upon retirement, I returned back, stayed with my parents in Anderson for a while, and then moved to Clemson.
For me, it was a little interesting because I was a reservist at that time, and so you're not used to going in every day. It's not putting on that uniform and going in on a daily basis anymore. So as a reservist, there are a lot of different facets to reserve side, but at that time, the job that I was doing, it was, again, very sporadic, so I didn't have that daily routine that I had to give up or not get used to. At that point, for me, on the reserve side, I basically lived my quote-unquote normal life, and then I did my military gig on the side. And so, my last days in the military were really like any normal day for me, really and truly. So I would say probably just the only thing that was different would have been my last day serving, like actually actively doing something with the military, and that actually I think was my PT test. Had to get that done one more time. So we ended up in South Carolina because it's a great debate. Where do you go after you retire? So the number one thing honestly we were looking for was a state that was military friendly, that would I would say respect our military benefits, where our retirement dollars would go the furthest. And we had a lot of family that had actually migrated to South Carolina at that point. I'm from Florida. My husband's from Tennessee. And that was another thing, is that South Carolina is kind of in the middle, especially here in the upstate. So it's somewhat of an even drive back to my hometown and to my husband's. So that was another driving factor as well. And then really we narrowed it down to South Carolina. And then from there we visited a lot of different cities and a lot of different locations in the state. And ultimately the house picked us. And that's how we ended up here in Pickens County.
And it was a very bittersweet day for me. I was excited to have my, not freedom back, but my ability to choose what I wanted to do every day. But it was also a very scary time because I'd gone from such a structured environment to an environment where the world was open, everything was a possibility, and having that immediate, overwhelming amount of choices was really scary and difficult. I remember really thinking about the fact that for over 3 years, every morning I woke up, I knew exactly what I was going to wear. I knew what the uniform of the day was. I knew what I had to do. I knew how it was supposed to look. And then I got out, and you wake up to and get ready to go to work, and you're like, I don't know what to wear to work. Like, what's appropriate? and that kind of thing. So that was a very interesting thing that I kind of stuck with me. So I was discharged from San Diego, California, out on Coronado Island, which is where the aircraft carriers are stationed. And I stayed in San Diego for about 6 more months, just working an odd job at a pizza place, and I loved it because I just love San Diego. It's 75 and sunny every day of the year. But it was very, very expensive as far as cost of living. So I went back home and stayed with my parents for a little while in upstate New York, but that was in about November. And so snow was quickly approaching, and I realized that after being out of the winter for several years, I didn't want to come back. So I got talking to a couple friends and from the service that had also gotten out, and one of them was down here getting ready to start school at Clemson University. And I kind of thought, well, that's a great idea. I love South Carolina, fell in love with it when I was there. And I'm really looking at getting ready to go back to school. So I ended up moving down here to Clemson, South Carolina, and I have been in Pickens County since, and I just love it here. The GI Bill was very helpful for me. It got me through a year at Tri-County Technical College doing just general ed classes. Got me through almost 3 years at Clemson University, getting my bachelor's degree in psychology, and now it is helping me pursue my master's in social work.
I did, and kept in contact with one especially for a couple of years, and then we lost contact. She was from New Jersey.
Yeah, I had some close friends. One was a girl who was they called them cubicle mates or bunk mates. Her name was Diane South, and she was a Mormon, and she also helped me to be neat and organized, because she was almost obsessive compulsive, but she and I became good friends, and we wrote to each other for a little while after I got out.
Do you continue any of the other relationships?
No, it's been 60 years, so I really don't know where they all are. I've run into a couple of them, at the first couple of years, and was glad to see them, and then we even had lunch together, but I really don't know where they are now.
I have one buddy that I served in Korea with, and in 2004, we actually crossed paths over the internet. And at the time, he was in Baghdad and I was in South Carolina, so it was kind of exciting, to get to rehash old times, and because we had not seen each other or spoken since 1987, so that was, and we still occasionally, over Facebook or whatever, and he has called me from time to time to, just say hi.
Absolutely. That's what I love about the military, is that everywhere you go, it's like you obviously you have to start over. And so you get to make new friends in each location. And so over the years, we definitely have that handful of friends that are definitely close friends that we have stayed in touch with over the years. And even the ones that you don't stay in touch with, if I haven't talked to somebody in 5 years, I can still pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I'm coming through Arizona. You guys still living there, and pick up where we left off.
Absolutely. I made lots of close friendships, and I still speak with several of them to this day. And it's a different kind of friendship. I have some friends that we speak once a year, but it's like nothing ever happened. It's like we've been together the whole time. When you're under that much stress and that kind of grueling environment, I think the bonds you make are very strong.